The Twits Part 4. Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. "Oh, wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy, feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in a pot for bird pie before this day is out." "How you gonna do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who'd come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit went very close to Mrs. Twit and lowered his voice so that neither the birds nor the monkeys could hear. "I've got a great idea," he said. "We'll both go into town right away, and we'll buy a gun each. How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention!" he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it. One on top of the other. Quick, get on with it. We feel Mrs. Twit's stick across your backsides." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest child at the very top. "Now stay there till we come back," Mr. Twit ordered. "Don't you dare move, and don't overbalance. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you all in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. Mugglewump has an idea. As soon as Mr. and Mrs. Twit had disappeared down the road, the monkeys all flipped right back onto their feet the right way up. "Quick, get the key!" Mugglewump called out to the roly-poly bird, who was still sitting on the roof of the house. "What key?" shouted the roly-poly bird. "The key to the door of our cage," cried Mugglewump. "It's hanging on the nail in the woodshed. That's where he always puts it." The roly-poly bird flew down and came back with the key in his beak. Mugglewump reached a hand through the bars of the cage and took the key. He put it in the lock and turned it. The door opened, and all 4 monkeys leapt out together. "We're free!" cried the 2 little ones. "Where shall we go, Dad? Where shall we hide?" "Don't get excited," said Mugglewump. "Calm down, everybody. Before we can escape from this beastly place, we have one very, very important thing to do." "What?" they asked him. "We are going to turn those terrible twits upside down." "We're going to what?" they cried. "You must be joking, Dad." "I'm not joking," Mugglewump said. "We're going to turn both Mr. and Mrs. Twit upside down with their legs in the air." "Don't be ridiculous," said the roly-poly bird. "How can we possibly turn those 2 maggoty old monsters upside down?" We can," cried Mugglewump. "We are going to make them stand on their heads for hours and hours, perhaps forever. Let them see what it feels like for a change." "How?" said the roly-poly bird. "Just tell me how." Mugglewump laid his head on one side, and a tiny twinkling little smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Now and again," he said, but not very often, "I have a brilliant idea. This is one of them. Follow me, my friends, follow me." He scampered off toward the house, and the 3 other monkeys and the roly-poly bird went after him. "Buckets and paintbrushes," cried Mugglewump. "That's what we want next. There are plenty in the workshed. Hurry up, everyone. Get a bucket and a paintbrush." Inside Mr. Twit's workshed there was an enormous barrel of hug-tight sticky glue, the stuff he used for catching birds. "Fill your buckets," Mugglewump ordered. "We are now going on to the big house." Mrs. Twit had hidden the key to the front door under the mat, and Mugglewump had seen her doing it, so it was easy for them to get in. In they all went, all 4 monkeys with their buckets of sticky glue, and then came the roly-poly bird flying in after them with a bucket in his beak and a brush in his claw. The great glue painting begins. "This is the living room," announced Mugglewump. "The grand and glorious living room where those 2 fearful, frumptious freaks eat bird pie every week for supper." "Please don't mention bird pie again," said the roly-poly bird. "It gives me the shudders." "We mustn't waste time," cried Mugglewump. Hurry up! Now the first thing is this. I want everyone to paint sticky glue all over the ceiling. Cover it all, smear it in every corner. Over the ceiling, they cried. Why the ceilings? Never mind, shouted Mugglewump. Just do as you're told and don't argue. But how do we get up there? They asked. We can't reach. Monkeys can reach anywhere, shouted Mugglewump. He was in a frenzy of excitement now, waving his paintbrush and his bucket and leaping about all over the room. Come on, come on! Jump on the table, stand on the chairs, hop on each other's shoulders. Roly-Poly can do it flying. Don't stand there gaping, we have to hurry, don't you understand that? Those terrible twits will be back any moment, and this time they'll have guns. Get on with it, for heaven's sakes, get on with it. And so the great glue painting of the ceiling began. All the other birds who had been sitting on the roof flew in to help, carrying paintbrushes in their claws and beaks. There were buzzards, wild ducks, woodpeckers, magpies, rooks, ravens, and many more. Everyone was splashing away like mad, and with so many helpers, the job was soon finished. The carpet goes on the ceiling. What now? They all said, looking at Mugglewump. Aha! Cried Mugglewump. Now for the fun. Are you ready for the greatest upside-down trick of all time? Are you ready? We're ready, said the monkeys. We're ready, said the birds. Pull out the carpet, shouted Mugglewump. Pull this huge carpet out from under the furniture and stick it onto the ceiling. Onto the ceiling, cried one of the small monkeys. But that's impossible, Dad. I'll stick you to the ceiling if you don't shut up, snapped Mugglewump. He's dotty, they cried. He's balmy. He's batty. He's nutty. He's screwy. He's wacky, cried the roly-poly bird. Poor old Muggles has gone off his wump at last. Oh, do stop shouting such rubbish and give me a hand, said Mugglewump, catching hold of one corner of the carpet. Pull, you nitwits, pull! The carpet was enormous. It covered the entire floor from wall to wall. It had a red and gold pattern on it. It's not easy to pull an enormous carpet off the floor when the room is full of tables and chairs. Pull, yelled Mugglewump, pull, pull, pull! He was like a demon hopping around the room and telling everyone what to do. But you couldn't blame him. After months and months of standing on his head with his family, he couldn't wait for the time when the terrible twits would be doing the same thing. At least that's what he hoped. With the monkeys and the birds all pulling and puffing, the carpet was dragged off the floor and finally hoisted up onto the ceiling. And there it stuck. All at once, the whole ceiling of the living room was carpeted in red and gold. The furniture goes up. Now the table, the big table, shouted Mugglewump. Turn the table upside down and put a dollop of sticky glue onto the bottom of each leg, and then we shall stick that onto the ceiling as well. Hoisting the huge table upside down onto the ceiling was not an easy job, but they managed it in the end. Will it stay there? They cried. Is the glue strong enough to hold it up? It's the strongest glue in the world, Mugglewump replied. It's the special bird-catching, bird-killing glue for smearing on trees. Please, said the roly-poly bird, I have asked you before not to mention that subject. How would you like it if it was monkey pie they made every Wednesday and all your friends had been boiled up and I went on talking about it? I do beg your pardon, said Mugglewump. I'm so excited I hardly know what I'm saying. Now the chairs, do the same with the chairs. All the chairs must be stuck upside down to the ceiling and in their right places. Oh, do hurry, everybody. Any moment now, those two filthy freaks are going to come rushing in with their guns. The monkeys, with the birds helping them, put glue on the bottom of each chair leg and hoisted them up to the ceiling. Now the smaller tables, shouted Mugglewump, and the big sofa, and the sideboard, and the lamps, and all those tiny little things. The ashtrays, the ornaments, and that beastly plastic gnome on the sideboard. Everything, absolutely everything, must be stuck to the ceiling. It was terribly hard work. It was especially difficult to stick everything onto the ceiling and exactly in its right place. But they got it done in the end. Now what? Cried the roly-poly bird. He was out of breath and so tired he could hardly flap his wings. Now the pictures, cried Mugglewump. Turn all the pictures upside down. And will one of you birds please fly out onto the road and watch to see when those frumpious freaks are coming back? I'll go, said the roly-poly bird. I'll sit on the telephone wires and keep guard. It'll give me a rest. The ravens swoop over. They had only just finished the job when the roly-poly bird came swooping in, screaming, They're back! They're coming back! Quickly, the birds flew back onto the roof of the house. The monkeys rushed into their cage and stood upside down, one on top of the other. And a moment later, Mr. and Mrs. Twit came marching into the garden, each carrying a fearsome-looking gun. "I'm glad to see those monkeys are still upside down," said Mr. Twit. "They're too stupid to do anything else," said Mrs. Twit. "Hey, look at all those cheeky birds still up there on the roof. Let's go inside and load up our lovely new guns, and then it'll be bang, 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 and bird pie for supper." Just as Mr. and Mrs. Twit were about to enter the house, 2 black ravens swooped low over their heads. Each bird carried a paintbrush in its claw, and each paintbrush was smeared with sticky glue. As the ravens whizzed over, they brushed a streak of sticky glue onto the tops of Mr. and Mrs. Twit's heads. They did it with the lightest touch, but even so, the Twits both felt it. "Oh, what's that?" cried Mrs. Twit. "Some beastly bird has dropped his dirty droppings on my head." "On mine too," shouted Mr. Twit. "I felt it! I felt it!" "Well, don't touch it," cried Mrs. Twit. "You'll get it all over your hands. Come inside and we'll wash it off with the sink." "Filthy, dirty brutes!" yelled Mr. Twit. "I'll bet they did it on purpose. Just wait till I've loaded up my gun." Mrs. Twit got the key from under the doormat, where Mugglewump had carefully replaced it, and into the house they went.